Welcome to another episode of Code for Thought. To say that women are underrepresented in tech is, to put it mildly, an understatement. And high-performance computing or supercomputing, which plays a crucial part in research software engineering, is no exception. And the numbers speak for themselves. Stack Overflow, which is a popular website for the tech community, runs an annual survey answered by tens of thousands of developers and tech leads worldwide. And in 2022, over 90% were men. And if we compare this with the results from previous years, the needle barely moved. Interestingly, the 2023 survey no longer has a breakdown by gender and etc., but I digress. The situation in high-performance computing, as I said, is not a lot different. For example, the annual supercomputing conference from last year, the SC22, stated that circa 14% of the attendees were female. Luckily, there are efforts to address this imbalance, and one of the key drivers for this is the group Women in High Performance Computing, or Women HPC for short. And therefore, I'm really thrilled to welcome Cristin Merritt and Elsa Gonsiorowski from Women HPC. Women HPC and the various chapters they run around the globe have increased the visibility and contributions to HPC not just from women, but from any groups that are currently underrepresented in the field. They've been very active at conferences like the annual RSE, the International Super Conference held in Hamburg in 2023, and the forthcoming Supercomputing Conference in Denver in November 2023. On top of that, they run workshops and seminars, so please do say hello to them when you see them in Denver, the next RSE conference, or any other conference and workshop. And now over to my conversation with Cristin and Elsa. Hi Elsa, hi Cristin. Thanks very much for your time today. Let's start with some quick introductions before we talk about Women HPC. Maybe you can start, Elsa.
Hi, I'm Elsa Gonsiorowski from Lawrence Livermore National Lab. I work there in our HPC facility as a customer support specialist, mostly supporting I/O and kind of the more general questions. I've been involved with Women in HPC since around 2016. Actually, they really helped get me involved with HPC as a whole because I attended supercomputing to speak at one of their workshops as an early career lightning speaker. So I'm so grateful and happy to be a part of Women in HPC.
Ah, fantastic. Cristin.
Hi, my name is Cristin Merritt. I am Chief Marketing Officer at a company called Alsa's Flight, and we specialize in integration and managed services for high-performance computing. I have been with Women in HPC, I think this July was my 5th year under the direct volunteer for Women in HPC for social media. So I write all of the social media for Women in HPC. I also do general communications for the two big global conferences, including SC and ISC, where I found a picture of Elsa's poster and Elsa standing in front of it not too long ago. When I was looking, I was like, I remember that. So that was great fun. And in fact, I just sent out a press release in regards to our SC23 workshop and getting early career speakers involved, as well as the fact that Women in HPC has fellowships, thankfully. And I am also executive board member for business management for Women in HPC, which means I help find money and funding for global initiatives, such as the fellowships.
Right, let's talk about Women HPC. How long has it been in operation, so to speak? And what was your motivation to get involved?
Was 2013, Elsa, that it was founded?
I think so.
I think so. In fact, I looked this up recently. I just had a conversation around this. It was founded in EPCC, that's the University of Edinburgh, by two incredible women, Alison Kennedy and Toni Collis. I believe Alison is on her way into retirement shortly, but I hope she sticks around the community forever and a day. And Toni actually now runs her own business, which is wonderful. And it was kind of founded as a lunch group originally for a bunch of women at EPCC trying to figure out how can we grow diversity in high performance computing? How can we bring more people in who otherwise wouldn't be women, underrepresented groups or otherwise? And it just grew from there.
What is the situation today? How would you describe that? How balanced is it, HPC, or the world that you see in HPC?
There's been some change for sure. And certainly with the rise of diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, I feel that companies have started to take a more rooted in data look at how their diversity is and really trying to track statistics and move in the right direction. They've also recognized that it's, not just a pipeline problem, but the problem is not just getting new women graduates, but keeping them in careers in HPC or tech over the full life of their career. I don't have the numbers. I don't know that the numbers have improved all that much, but at least as a culture, we're talking about it and we're starting to recognize and understand that we need to support women and men of underrepresented groups and trying to figure out how to support and raise their numbers overall.
Now, I'm going to support Elsa because while she was talking, she was buying me time to go look up some numbers. So, in 2021, thanks to the wonderful people at one of our chapters in Australia and New Zealand, they had actually just been discussing this on their Slack channel. At supercomputing, there was actually a paper put forward, the percentage of women authors in HPC papers, and it was a stunningly low 10%. That was the average they came through. And the demographics that year were 14.4% identified as female. So we've got a fairly low female contribution in our field. Not to say, though, that I agree with Elsa. I think there is definitely a shift. It's a positive shift towards inclusion and thinking about it in a very HPC way, right? We look at things pragmatically and from multiple different angles. I think one of the things that I was really called to was the movement towards away from unconscious bias to decision-making bias, which is much more measurable. You have things like looking for similarities. Why are we hiring people? Why do we continuously ask for these type of people for that field? Also trying to rush. We want to be part of the inclusion movement, but not thinking through how they want to be involved. Looking at different stories, trying to look globally, think different culturals, and also moving beyond safety. It's quite easy to stick to what you know. I mean, all of us are afraid. I mean, change is a tough thing. We are hardwired for safety. That's just evolution. And going beyond that and stepping out of our comfort zone is a tough thing to do, but there is real movements, real true movements within the HPC field towards how do we let more people in? This field keeps growing, it changes, people want in. How do we do it? How do we do it right?
Are there some recommendations how you would do it right? You mentioned already recruitment, but then Elsa touched on a very important point, I think, is also keeping people in careers. Let's tackle perhaps the recruitment problem first. What kind of steps would you recommend and what kind of steps are being taken actually, or which ones do you see are being taken?
I think with recruitment, HPC does sometimes like to think of itself as struggling because HPC is somewhat niche. We need really technical skills that aren't always being taught in undergraduate programs. So sometimes we feel like we have to wait for master's or PhD students. But I think as a whole, we also have to understand that when we go out and recruit folks, we sometimes need to explain what HPC is. And so just saying HPC doesn't always have that recognition or spark people's imaginations like we think it should. And it obviously does for those of us involved. So for recruitment, I think the best that I've heard or what I think can really work is working with institutions like universities or those where they have students to either help them and support their courses, either doing short courses in HPC or partnering with capstone projects so that students are somewhat exposed to what HPC is and what HPC can do. And it's broader than just working with computer science students. It's working with those in the domain sciences who need to use our HPC resources. And the more that they're aware of how HPC can help their pure science, the more that they'll kind of participate and give back to our community as well. So I think it's taking a broad raising awareness angle and working with those institutions that you can to get the name out there and show folks that there's a career path here, what HPC is, there's a community here.
So also, and I'll send this to you so you have it, Peter, the N8 chapter in the UK did a big project on inclusion hiring and came up with a checklist as well. There's not one right way to do things. I often tell people, like, especially when they get into the quote people side of things, it's like, I can't restart a person. I can't reboot somebody and they come back better or install some software and all of a sudden and they know how to do certain things a certain way. People are vital aspect, and coming from different backgrounds and stuff like that is vital in order to grow the company. And so like the N8 spent some time on the inclusion checklist, which was great ways to get rid of some of these quote unquote decision making biases that I just kind of alluded to. The other thing that's really going on, like I'm recruiting now actually, so my brain is like, oh, like, oh, you've just said recruiting. I have really done my best to do some very simple practices like removing the names of the people applying, removing what their qualifications are, so I don't suddenly toss somebody to the side because they didn't go from a university I preferred or something silly like that. Also, well, I don't even want to know if they went to university because I'm lucky enough to work with people who've come from what do you call the technical apprenticeship backgrounds. I'm lucky. I know full well that you don't always need to come with a degree. And I also really appreciate the movements that here in the UK they've made in digital humanities and in trying to marry creatives to technical roles. And sometimes that means that they get called into high performance computing and they may come through a crazy path, but they find their way here. So those are just a few other ways too that we can look at the recruiting.
How do you keep the momentum going? Because it takes a long time. It takes years, doesn't it, before somebody enters university and then takes up a position at HPC.
One of the things that Livermore has started to do is we run an HPC cluster academy. So we get undergraduate students who come for the summer and they train on skills specific for HPC system admin. So how to administer a cluster, bring it up, bring it down, manage nodes, set up networking, and all sorts of these skills. We've been doing it for several years now, and we have hired from it. We've had students who came in their earlier college careers. It takes a couple years for them to eventually graduate, but they already have the skills we know we need. So not only are we training directly students to have the skills that we need, we then are building this pool of folks that we could potentially hire in the future. So I think internships are a huge win-win. You give students the skills that you know you're going to need and that they will need for other positions. You get to try them out. You get to give them something interesting, hopefully, to do. They get to see your culture and start picturing themselves in your workforce. So I think leveraging students can create that win-win and then pretty quickly start seeing numbers in the workforce. You can start seeing direct hires from that program.
And is that why Women HPC are also interacting with these internships to ensure that the people who go into these internships are from a diverse background, or people from a diverse background have a chance to get into it?
We actually have 24 chapters and affiliates. So we have I think it's 4 affiliates and 20 chapters. And they are the ones who are local eyes and ears and get people in on the ground, which is actually incredible because they are also the ones that find these internships and gets the word out into the community. And it feeds up through the global aspects that I help work on. For example, so we've got Texas chapter for women in HPC, and they're big into the HPC leadership conference that's coming up this year. It's actually happening in Stanford. They're trying to move it around a little bit more, and that's a big remit within their Texas chapter, is to get the word out and to recruit people to attend that leadership conference. And then in the UK, there's the CIUK student cluster competition, and a lot of the UK women HPC are chapters. Again, I'm sorry, I'm calling on the N8. The N8 has probably our most active university chapter. That's the national 8 universities together working to create opportunities for students to do competitions on clusters. And with women in HPC, we've seen people with 0 experience to tons of experience, mentorship, the whole bit. And that's a wonderful way to get people exposed. And then also through the supporter networks that we have, we've got a champion this year for women in HPC, Do It Now. And they went and sponsored some women to go to a European conference, small, friendly, to, again, get that exposure, get out there, get networking. Elsa probably doesn't get this when I say the every little helps thing that they always say at Tesco.
That's Tesco, yeah.
Tesco, it's a Tesco ad saying everyone gives a little bit. And when you do those little bits, they start adding up. If you sit and you say, oh, it's just women HPC, but the Elsa just talked about the wonderful things happening at Livermore. Everybody contributing a little bit is what's going to change this. We're not going to wake up tomorrow and everybody be, inclusive and everybody rid of their biases. Everyone's there to say, how can I move that needle a little bit further today? How can I bring one more person in that may have passed this by otherwise? And finding those little programs and things, that's just how you do it.
So let's talk about Women HPC as an organization. You mentioned chapters, but could you explain how the organization is shaped in general and the kind of structure and how it works?
Women HPC has an executive board of which I'm part of. In fact, we're recruiting internally right now for more executive board members. We do not currently have chair or chairs, and that is because we're recruiting for the executive board, because I think what we're going to try to do is bring that up. So that's your global side. And then under that is the chapters and affiliates, and that's the local side. And then we have the workshops, of which Elsa's running SC23 this year, and then the ISC, and then cross fingers. Maybe we can get involved in supercomputing Asia, because that is moving to Sydney, where we have a humongous membership, and perhaps we can get something global there. In terms of stuff, it is volunteer run, no membership dues, none of that kind of stuff. Supporters who thankfully will give us money for the global events and for the fellowships and for stuff like that. Like, we are definitely kind of like building back up again, because the pandemic, like all things, made things crazy. And Elsa did a fantastic job completely rethinking how we approach our workshops. We're just in this kind of wonderful creative explosion and growth phase right now.
I need to find out more about that, about the creative moment. How did you reshape the workshops?
Like I said, I've been attending the Women in HPC workshops for over 5, 6, 7 years now. And we've done a lot and we've tried a lot of different types of sessions and activities. And some, I think, have engaged the communities in different ways. And so after kind of the end of COVID and last year, I just looked around and said we had kind of fallen into a rut. I think with COVID, you're kind of in a holding pattern, just trying to hold on and make something work. And then this year, I just said, this is the time for us to expand and try something new. So this year, my goal is to really expand beyond just women and include both women and men from underrepresented groups. That is my goal, is to give folks who don't identify as women, but do understand challenges of being in the minority, to give them a voice and a platform and a space to feel comfortable and to join us. We'll see if I'm successful. I think in the past, Women in HPC has really advertised itself as just women. And I know when it came out of Edinburgh, that was the problem that they really saw. And they didn't understand globally that there were other challenges in other identity dimensions. But I hope to at least take the first step to broadening our inclusion overall. We're keeping a lot of the same format, but we're just being very particular in the speakers that we're choosing and the topics that we're choosing. Our workshops have always had this component of education, so educating our community about workplace challenges, about latest research and themes and topics in diversity, equity, inclusion. And then we've also had this early career component where we do bring early career researchers who are doing HPC research or scientific research using HPC resources to the conference and give them a chance to network and meet the community. With those two kind of aspects, we're just trying to expand our audience this year.
And just to be clear, we're not only talking about gender, but we're also talking about people from different ethnic backgrounds or from different sexual orientation, or what does that mean?
Yes, exactly. So people who have traditionally been oppressed from any aspect of gender, race, sexuality, sexual orientation. Those are the main three that I've been focusing on, but I'm sure there's more to address, and making our workshop welcoming space for all and understanding that it's broader than just getting gender equity, but getting equity in so many other different ways.
So I always found it difficult to talk about these issues. I thought maybe it's because I'm an engineer and I wasn't trained to talk about emotions very much or social issues. Is that something that you encountered, that it was difficult for you to bring this up?
So I think the Women in HPC workshop has been a really great venue for educating. The HPC workforce, as you said, is highly technical and certainly not trained or educated in social sciences and those skills. At our workshop, we do have an educational component where we bring in folks who are trained in the social sciences or who have done research in that area, we bring them in and ask them to speak and educate our community, educate the community on the terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion, educate them on what's going on in the workforce and the statistics and how we can improve and best practices. So I think by having those professionals who are very good at speaking about these topics come in, that's been where I've been trained to speak about these things, is through them. Certainly, there are other DEI initiatives at Livermore and all over that I've participated in, but WHPC workshops have been a huge, huge component of my training.
I have to say, the ally talks, they have been probably one of the richest sources of how to change the narrative without running through a wall and exploding a room going, we need to talk about inclusion now. Stuff like silly things where men who are massive supporters of ours have shifted talks about, I make sure that everyone in the room has time during a meeting to answer a question, or I talk to a woman first within the room, or somebody who might be hiding. I have heard of people who've done informal coffees, and I have heard of these allies get up and talk about times when, especially the pandemic, suddenly having to take care of kids, and all of a sudden they're suddenly seeing this burden that has been kind of hidden from public view and stuff like that. So coming to the workshops are a really good way because of high performance computing being a technical field. Sometimes I think it's a lot of people think it's a binary decision. It's all or nothing all the time. When you go to the workshops, or if you become part of our community, or if you come to a webinar or whatever, and you can see that you can do little tiny things such as making sure that everyone's included in a meeting, to like what I do for my recruiting right now, which I'm trying to just get rid of the names and stuff like that so I don't see who it is and find myself biased towards someone. These little things that you can do. Again, it's that slowly but surely getting the statue out of the marble of making those little shifts towards better things. And like with Elsa's work with transforming our workshop, one of the things that we've always said in Women in HPC that holds us back is the fact that we have the word women in our title. And it used to very well be, oh, that's the girls thing. Oh, that's the women thing. You go do your girl thing. And mercifully, beautifully, and wonderfully, people have realized that if you go to a Women in HPC event, it's because everybody's welcome there. And we have worked very hard to make sure that nobody should walk in thinking, oh, we're going to look down upon you if you come into this room. We need that mixed voices. We need male allies. We need people who, non-binary individuals, people from non-traditional backgrounds in those rooms having those conversations, because with that, then we can come up with the right solutions that hopefully can drive our entire field forward.
The one thing that we haven't talked about yet was the retention. So how do you keep people from different backgrounds? How do you keep them in a career? And how can Women HPC help in there?
On the whole, it's important to recognize that if you're pushing everyone to work super hard and be only focused on making money or whatever, if you're not seeing your workforce employees as whole people, you will drive them away, be they women, men, or anyone. So yes, women and others in our society have other burdens placed on them and other challenges. So recognizing those challenges and appreciating them and still supporting those employees as part of your workforce and finding space for them and finding a way for them to thrive and grow, I think is really important. Some of it is taking away the biases of managers and people who are in charge of career path and career growth, and showing women and underrepresented minorities that there is a path for growth, that they can see themselves moving into positions where they would like to be. But I think it's not seeing women or underrepresented minorities as something special, but treating everyone a little bit better and giving them everyone space to grow.
I mean, just to echo, I like that, seeing people as whole people, not part people. You know, they always say you do something with your whole butt, not half butt, you know, and when people say stuff like that. And I know that for the longest time, and I think the pandemic really busted this wall down, is that you had your work personality and your home personality, and neither the two did intersect. And a lot of the retention is about viewing flexibility within people's work and sitting and understanding what people want to do. I think one of the great challenges, and not just for HPC, but for tech, it's the whole managerial track, is the shifting away from doing a technical role to managing people, and how different and varied that is, and how some people are natural to shift to those types of things and other people just despise it. But then how do you grow? How do you grow within your own technical role when the only path right now is managing a bunch of people, and you don't want to do that? You want to really grow that project side of you. Thankfully, we have a space with Women in HPC to have those kind of conversations. I've really seen the community, at least in the UK, grow into a space where they want to have those kind of communications and to sit and say, right, when is it more about just giving someone a pay rise? When is it that we need to give someone education? When is it that we need to give someone flexibility with how they work, and not try to draw these hard lines, which it's a bias in and of itself, right? It's my story. Well, my story is I work all the time. So why I expect all my employees to work all the time? That's crazy talk, because that's the story, that's the view you see, but other people see other ways. And it's getting rid of that and taking that away will help. I think the other thing too is being aware of the type of culture you build. What kind of workplace do you want people coming into? I mean, I started out in tech a million years ago when the dinosaurs walked the earth, and you could go to trade shows and there were women in bikinis giving out shots. As a woman, you
Yeah.
come into those kind of trade shows and you're just like, culturally, you got to think about that kind of stuff. What kind of culture do you want? What kind of ways do you want to be? And that kind of values and understanding who you are, who your institution is, who your company is, whatever, it matters. It matters, especially with the upcoming younger generations. I know there's a bigger push for meaning in their work, and understanding that and accepting that and not trying to force my view is far more beneficial than just saying it's my way or the hard way or the other way. So reverse mentoring is another way to do retention. Rather than everyone having a senior person, I'm more than happy to have someone straight out of college or high school or wherever sitting with me saying, okay, this is how I see the world. And that helps you grow and it helps them grow too.
The one thing that has entered the conversation earlier was COVID. The reason I mention this now is we talked about life-work balance and the fact that during COVID, companies and organizations went quite a big way in order to keep going, to keep the workforce that they couldn't get into the office working and retain them. A lot of push was more towards work-life balance and getting the balance right and cutting employees a little bit more slack. Do you see that trend reversing?
I think with any change, there's always this kind of pendulum, especially COVID was such an extreme change. It's not a surprise to see the pendulum swing back a little bit in the other direction.
A long time, well before the pandemic, I was lucky enough to go to an Oxford University Leadership Academy for a week. And they didn't call it the work-life balance, they called it the seesaw, because they said there's times when there's things that are weighed more in one direction and then in another. And in fact, I even, with a lot of the methodology that I do in my work, and even the stuff we do with women in HPC, I always say, oh, my graph is very pretty because everything's equal right now. But we all know that that's not true. Sometimes your personal life comes much more. Sometimes the work side comes much more. Sometimes you're in the middle. Sometimes something comes out of the blue that you don't expect. And building in Slack and things like that, I think flexibility is going to be key for our workforce going forward, irregardless of looking at inclusivity. And I also think that the sustainability aspect of our community has really grabbed on prominence. People care a lot about both the ecological and the long-term effects of working intense pressure fields like this that actually use machines that are complicated, that use energy, all this stuff. And I think the things, when I've been lucky enough to present about the field of high performance computing, I say I entered HPC 7 years ago at the start of the cloud methodology movement. It was called originally public cloud versus traditional. Who's going to win the battle? But it really ended up becoming a cloud methodology push. And cloud methodology, AI came into play, this pandemic came in, and all this like massive amount of change happened in a very short period of time. And when you think about that, rather than thinking about with I need to sort this out with an engineering mindset, if you turn around and look at it with compassion in and say, right, how are we going to build not only a future, but what kind of legacy do I want to leave? I think that's the kind of narratives you should really bring into play when talking about stuff like retention and hiring is what's the legacy we're all going to leave behind when this is all said and done? And can we do a bit of good while we're here?
I'd like to finish with some practical questions. You mentioned the workshop in Stanford and then the supercomputing conference.
The women in the WHPC workshop at supercomputing is all day on Monday, so Monday, November 13th at supercomputing in Denver. That's kind of the kickoff of the week. We have a full day workshop. Again, the morning will be focused on some more education and talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion topics. The afternoon will be focused on early career researchers and networking. During the week of supercomputing, we will have a networking dinner. So that's a sponsored dinner where we give out swag bags. We also do a diversity day where we hand out t-shirts and ask folks to wear them around the conference just to show support for women and men from underrepresented groups and show that they value diversity in HPC.
And then also early career speakers, the first set of submissions close on August 4th.
Mm-hmm.
Those who are successful with their submission will be invited to apply for the fellowship should they wish. I understand that some people are lucky and they already have their travel covered, but many do not. And we're hoping what that does, it invites people who otherwise would have considered not applying to present because we want to hear your work. And I think it's really important because Elsa and I both started with early career. Elsa came with her technical stuff. I actually came with trying to figure out adoption of new technology. So I was talking about a bit on the crazy, like a bit of the social side and who's an early adopter in new tech when it comes down the pipe. And it was great because the mentorship you get, people are there to help you. They want you to be able to get to the community, to talk to people, to be introduced. I'm just so grateful for that opportunity. So the HPC Leadership Institute, that is happening thanks to Microsoft, MITRE, and TAC. We have a wonderful guy. His name is Andrew Jones, who's been a massive ally of ours. He's now with Microsoft. And then we have Melissa Fratkin with TAC, who is running the Women in Texas chapter for us. And that's all about high level, so you want to lead in HPC. How do you come to that? How do you think about HPC strategy? How do you think about technical strategy? How do you think about the people strategy? And all of those things come together in hopes that when people walk out, they have a bit of a roadmap on what they want to achieve with their career or maybe even with their institution in order to drive this particular field forward.
I think it's happening every year, so the
Yes, it
fellowship
does.
and all of
Yeah,
that.
it happens
So
every year. So seeing it and knowing that it exists, even if our episode airs, after the fact, people go, aha, yeah, that's right. They do a US site leadership conference, and it usually happens in the autumn. And yeah, keep it in their books because it does happen regularly.
Thank you so much, Cristin and Elsa. And you've got your work cut out. I wish you all the best and good luck and all the best for the future again.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
As Cristin and Elsa explained during the interview, Women HPC is for all members of the community, and they have staunch allies from people with different backgrounds. So if you want to support them, give them a shout or join them. Every little helps, as Cristin said. Oh, time's up. See you next time. But before I forget, this podcast is covered by the Creative Commons license. See ya.